Hello, you legendary people. Welcome to or welcome back to Lauren's Legends. Previously, I was doing several of the top legends for each state, but I have decided to change things around and I am now going to go through 5 states at a time and talk about the wildest story they have in each state. So, get excited. Part 1 starts now. First up is Arkansas. Arkansas has its own fair share of legends and lore. The state's most popular legend and ghost story surprisingly does not have a graveyard or an old building. Instead, it has a very interesting ghost story centered around a massive sandstone formation known as the Natural Steps. These are located in Pulaski County. This unique formation is found along the banks of the Arkansas River and located about 20 miles northwest of Little Rock and consists of 2 parallel sandstone walls joined by a series of steps. These natural steps are rich with Native American history. In 1932, the University of Arkansas performed an archaeological survey of the area near the steps. The team unbelievably discovered 57 burial mounds, which contain pottery from the local tribes. The nearby town is actually named after the steps, and it is a focal point for the area. This town has deep history because the Spanish and then American settlers arrived in the area in mid to late 1700s. These natural steps aren't just historically important. They've also long been linked to spooky stories and strange paranormal activities. According to lore, the KKK Klansmen had meetings at the steps to plan their evil doings, and a strange and well-known thing is that buildings and structures in this area have a tendency of just disappearing. For instance, in 1821, a group of residents discovered an old fort and several artifacts. When they later returned, the fort could no longer be located. This formation has its own notorious specter, and that is the woman in white. The story is that Martha Sanders and her love, Gustavus Sanders, were married at the top of the Natural Steps in 1880. Unfortunately, their bliss was short-lived as Gustavo suddenly and mysteriously fell ill and passed away just a few days later. Consumed with grief and unable to go on, Martha returned to the site of her nuptials and leapt to her death. Ever since, numerous people have reported seeing a phantom bride aimlessly moving around this area. There are, of course, more ghostly figures seen, and those are of the phantom soldiers. They are said to be searching the steps for eternity, looking for sunken treasure. The story goes that a small group of Confederate soldiers passed away while transporting a huge sum of gold by gunboat. They were in danger of being seized by the Union forces, and the Confederate soldiers came up with a plan to sink the boat near the Natural Steps and come back to it later to retrieve the gold. Sadly, 3 Confederate soldiers died when trying to sink the boat. They were actually buried in the town cemetery, and their graves are still there to this day. According to the legend, on a bright moonlit night, the men will rise from their watery grave and they will march in single file lines between the riverbank and the steps to uncover their hidden treasure. To add to the legend's credibility, in the late 19th century, a gold coin was found. By the 1940s, locals began dynamiting around the formation looking for the long-lost gold. But no treasure was ever found, and unfortunately, in the process, a portion of the natural steps was permanently destroyed. So, did you know about the natural steps? Have you heard any other stories about the natural steps? If so, please share with me in the comments. Next, we are going over to cover sunny California, specifically the St. Lucia Mountains. This legend goes back longer than 300 years. It is said that people looked up into the rural mountains of California to see tall, dark, foreboding figures, staring back at them only to watch them disappear seconds later. These figures are referred to as the Dark Watchers, and it is believed they appear between late afternoon and twilight to visitors in the rural Santa Lucia Mountains. Hundreds of witnesses, from Native Americans to American writers, have reported seeing these figures lingering on the mountains, seemingly silently watching those below. The St. Lucia Mountains are a long line that stretch along the California coast from Monterey County up through the central San Luis Obispo County. In the beginnings of the state, they presented a serious challenge to the Spanish explorers making their way across to the ocean. Even as these explorers made their way up the mountains in the 1700s, they reported seeing the dark figures and gave them their name that literally translate into the Dark Watchers. Even as American settlers would later make their way over the mountain, they would later too report the feeling of being watched from above. These stories are all consistent in that people are seeing very tall humanoid beings that are said to be anywhere from 7 feet tall to 15 feet tall. They're all dressed in all black and wearing flowing cloaks and wide-brimmed hats and are said to be silent, and no one has ever reported seeing any facial features. They vanish immediately when anyone tries to get closer. Legend states they are a group of migratory entities that stalk travelers along the mountain range. They have exceptional good hearing and impeccable eyesight, always protecting their unknown domain. Whether a sensory trick or creatures of another realm, the Dark Watchers continue to leave their mark on the contemporary culture of America. What do you think is happening out there at dusk on these mountain ridges? Next up is Colorado. Not sure if you noticed, but spoiler alert, we're going alphabetically. So Colorado has a juicy one, and that is Riverdale Road, located in Adams County. This road has gained the reputation of being the most haunted road in the country. I totally want to go. Just drive on it and see it, not like stay long. But anyways, the 11-mile stretch of winding road between Brighton and Thornton has certainly seen its fair share of unexplainable activity. To add to its mystique, it is a dangerous road with many curves leading to several accidents. Since January of 2021, there has been 3 deadly crashes on Riverdale Road, resulting in 5 deaths. These stories that come from this road seem to be never ending, and here are just a few examples. A ghost jogger that seems to tap on the sides of passing cars. According to the legend, he was out for a nightly run when he was hit and left to die by a motorist. Forever restless and angry at his fate, they say the jogger haunts this back road, looking for his killer in every passing car. He especially likes to creep up on people who park at the top of what is now called Joggers Hill. Word is, if you kill your lights and engine, he'll think you're the one that hit him. People have reported hearing the sounds of quick feet running towards them, followed by angry fists beating on the sides of their car and handprints appearing on the windows as the jogger is outside trying to get a look at his killer inside. Then we have the supernatural tale of the Phantom Camaro. The story goes that in the 1970s, the Camaro's owner perished in an accident at a blind corner on the road. The now phantom vehicle patrols the streets, but not to protect other drivers. Instead, the vehicle, which has only one working headlight, challenges drivers to races. As one might expect, that scenario does not end well. Legend says many have died racing the ghostly car around the same bend as the phantom driver decades earlier. Y'all, do not try to race a phantom car. Come on, people. Now, I definitely have to mention the witch hangings and the dark arts that are rumored to have been practiced here. With so many theories of high spirit activity, it only makes sense that it would interest those who believe in the satanic. Many rumors tell of the road being a meeting spot for those trying to conjure up the spirits of the long dead witches. The legend is that centuries ago, the trees along the road were used to hang those found to be using the witchcraft. Their lifeless bodies were left swaying with the wind as a warning to others of what would happen to them if they decided to practice the witchcraft. There are many reports of finding evidence of these kinds of rituals along the road. Some even claim to have seen apparitions of bodies hanging from trees. Then, the real story that has made this road so famous is that of the mansion owner that went crazy and set his home on fire with his family inside, resulting in the gates of hell theory. David Wolpert took the journey to Colorado in 1859. He came with 16 others who were in search of the discovery of the gold in the Colorado Rockies during the gold rush. He was never able to find any and settled down with Catherine Henderson. They married on January 20th, 1864 and settled in a house David built at 9190 Riverdale Road. By the end of that same year, they had their first child. But David seemed to have also welcomed something sinister into his home. Rumors began to spread of David reaching out to dark forces to help with his farm. That previous year, he had had terrible luck on the farm. Hearing the stories of the witches, he began to think the only way to ensure a healthy harvest would be to call upon the devil for help. Don't do that. David began to carve satanic and black magic symbols in the middle of the underground chicken coop. Using his own chickens as sacrifices, chanting and smearing their blood on himself, the late night sounds began attracting others, and they began going into David's land to get a better look at what was happening. So, David constructed a gate around his property, but unable to afford the metal for a new gate, he used whatever rusted metal he could find. The legend states that a day after he finished building his new iron rusted gate, the devil finally responded to one of David's pleas, agreeing to make him a deal for a bountiful farm. That night, David set his house ablaze, trapping his wife and newborn in the fire. David was never heard from again. The burnt remains of the home were torn down, but the gate David built prior to ending his family stayed up for almost a century. Many claimed that if you crossed the gates during the night, around the same time as when the family passed away, the air would become extremely thick as the smell of fire would engulf you. You would then hear the tortured screams of a woman echoing in the dark, seemingly coming from where the home once stood. When you left, you had to leave directly back through the gates. Those that didn't, when they reached their home, soon realized that whatever evils they met beyond the gate followed them back home. Many agree that the death and the rituals in that location have thinned the walls between the earth and hell, allowing something or several things to walk among us. Do you think you could walk down this road late at night? Moving right along to Connecticut. This legend comes from several counties, and it is that of the Melon heads. Locals believe in many different legends and myths in this small state. It may be small, but it has a mighty amount of paranormal stories and hauntings. These stories were popularized by Ed and Lorraine Warren, the very famous paranormal investigators. Several of their investigations were conducted here. As funny as the name sounds, this is one of the most frightening and well-known legends in Connecticut. The Melonheads are believed to be either a band of deranged escapees from an asylum or a group of remote settlers who have suffered facial abnormalities due to inbreeding. While basically all of Connecticut is connected to the paranormal, southwestern Connecticut has become a hotbed for the unexplained activity. In this area alone, 3 of the most prominent urban legends in Connecticut exist: sea serpents, the Leatherman, and the Melonheads. Longtime residents say one of the local stories they have all heard about growing up, and that everyone just knew, was about a group of giant-headed mutants that lived on the outskirts of town that preyed on those who were unfortunate enough to wander into their midst. Locals believe that they hide in between the trees and emerge to attack. This actually isn't just a Connecticut legend. They've reportedly been seen in Michigan and in Ohio as well. If the Melonheads did really escape from a mental hospital, it would most likely be the Garner Correctional Institute. This institute specialized with inmates with mental health problems. The building supposedly burned down in the 1960s. The locals believe that some of those inmates escaped and turned to cannibalism, which caused their heads to swell. If you are feeling adventurous and want to investigate yourself, Sawmill City Road in Shelton is known to be their primary stomping ground. Be sure to visit at night at your own risk. The last but not least today is Delaware. In Frankfort, there is known to be something called the Catman, the Gravekeeper. This is a creature with cat-like features that is reported to be a caretaker of the Long Cemetery and Graveyard in Frankfort. This cemetery is located on a dirt path in Sussex County and has been there since the 1800s. Witnesses say they spot the Catman watching over the cemetery from beyond the graves. One of the most notorious sightings of the Catman happened by a group of teenagers who wandered into the cemetery at night to drink some drinks. They were soon scared off upon seeing ghostly images of a dark, man-like and cat-like creature standing in the distance. I wonder if that was the last time they went drinking in a graveyard. There is also a legend that states if you knock 3 times on the brick wall behind the cemetery, the creature will tamper with your car so that it won't start when you try to leave, trying to keep you there with him. One forum writer on Delaware haunted houses wrote, "I literally live next to it and drive my ATV around there, and I have seen some unusual things that I cannot explain. At one point, my ATV wouldn't start for a couple of minutes, and there's been many times I have been creeped out." So, in conclusion, Delaware's Catman doesn't want to harm or hurt you, even by tampering with your car. It's just trying to show you who's boss and keeping you from messing around in his cherished and most beloved graveyard, the Long Cemetery. Would you be willing to test the Catman? Do you like my new way of doing this? Please let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.